very own Mr. John Patrick O'Neill, PhD. He has very kindly provided me some information to share with you for those of you who don't know everything there is to know about Patrick. He was in the United States Air Force as a staff sergeant, a Vietnam veteran against the war. He worked in aerospace and in the Silicon Valley semiconductor industry. He's a certified reliability engineer. He's a senior member of the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. He's a senior member of the American Society for Quality. He's a published author in engineering journals, vice president and senior project manager in a federal contracting firm, and married to his beauteous Rosalie O'Neill. He's also past president of the board of our congregation and very intelligent and interesting man, Mr. Patrick O'Neill.
Before I start, I'll just tell you a little story. When I was in the Air Force, we're on an airplane. What? Oh. I'll speak loudly. When I was in the Air Force, I was on a plane once, and it was a 4-engine cargo plane. We had 64 Army guys were transporting, and one of the engines went out. So the pilot told me, go down and make sure these guys don't panic. So I go down there and tell them the C-130 is the best aircraft that's ever built. It's perfectly fine to operate on 3 engines. I go back up. Just then, the second engine on that side went out. Fuel distribution problem. So I said, you better go back down there. And I go back down there and all these Army guys are like praying or shouting loudly. And I said, what are you guys doing? I was just down here. I told you we're perfectly fine with just 2 engines. And we landed safely, as you can see. But today we're going to be covering the junction of law and morality and religion, and how these 3 things affect how we feel about things. And I'll start out with a quote from the immortal Mark Twain. Does this thing work now? Very few souls are saved after the first 5 minutes of the sermon. Unfortunately, I'll probably go about 11. There's 3 sources of law that have influenced what we do today. First one is the Code of Hammurabi in 1800 BC. This is in the area of Iran and Iraq. And it starts out, these are the just decisions which Hammurabi has established. He was the guy in charge. The big thing here was the rule of law. You have the things written down so that you know if you're breaking the law or not, instead of somebody just coming along afterwards and saying you're not supposed to do that. You know, bad things are going to happen to you. The great majority of laws were about respecting property rights and what happens if you take somebody's property, and it's just like most of our laws now. Here are some of the sample laws. An eye for an eye. It actually says that if you cause someone to lose their eye, whether it's malicious or accident, same thing, you lose your eye. And this was written about 1,000 years before that showed up in the Bible. So They had it first. If you bring false charges against someone, you will be killed. That's a good one. Maybe the punishment's a little severe, but, that's a good concept. You have to repay your debts unless the storm god Adad ruins your crop. Then you can pay later. That seems fair. If a builder makes a house and the wall buckles, the builder must fix it. If an ox gores to death a man while it is passing through the street, the case has no basis in claim. Good for the ox, not for the pedestrian. And slaves who insult their masters, the slave will lose an ear. Not good to be a slave. Harboring fugitive slaves, death. Breaking into a house, death. On front of the house you broke into. Looting or burning houses, death. There's about 180 more things with the same penalty, and I won't repeat them all. We'll go now to China, Confucius, or Kung Fu Tzu in Chinese, and Master Kong, if you translate it. He was interested in harmony and order and right relations between people. And he didn't write laws, but people took what he had to say and they wrote laws later. One of the things he had is you have to obey your superior, whether it's in your family or in your city or in the country. However, the ruler has to have virtue. If the ruler is not virtuous, then it's okay not to do what they say. He had one important insight, which I don't think was in any legal system, is that you don't strictly follow the rules. You have to have judgment and knowledge on the judge to interpret the fairness of applying the rule. That was a big one, not always followed. And one of his followers, writing about him after his death, talked about Confucius coming back, and there had been a fire on his property. And when the stables were burnt down, on returning from court, Confucius said, "Was anyone hurt?" He did not ask about the horses. So apparently that was such a big thing that someone is caring about whether people got hurt instead of their property that they wrote it down. Now we go to Rome, and I may be corrected on my pronunciations, having not been a native Roman speaker, but there's a phrase, fiat justitia ruat caelum, a Latin phrase meaning let justice be done though the heavens fall. Was attributed to some guy named Lucius Calpurnius Piso. And, nice phrase, let justice be done though the heavens fall, only the Romans didn't really follow that at all. And we'll look at some examples, but it was a nice thought. Now, I wasn't alive during Roman times, so I had to read books about it and stuff, and I want to credit the people who I read. Tacitus, Suetonius, Gibbons, Emma Soltern, and Valerius Maximus. And Valerius Maximus, for those who don't speak Latin, means the biggest Valerius. So, most of the laws were property law, family law, and unlike today, the Romans didn't have police. So, if somebody broke into your house, you don't call the police and have them come and investigate. You'd have to figure out who did it yourself. There is no penalty for somebody robbing your house in the law. There's no penalty if someone goes and kills somebody in your family in the law. If somebody did you harm, you could go and sue them. You'd have to do your own investigation. You could actually hire people to do the investigation for you if you had the money. And then you can sue the person, but it costs money to sue other people. And if you won, you'd get some money, but if you don't have the money to bring a lawsuit, there is no justice for you. So the other remedy you have is you get a little piece of lead foil, commonly available. You scratch onto it your curse for the person who offended you, and you put it in a sacred place. And some of those have been found and unwrapped, and like someone had a piece of pottery stolen and went with 2 long paragraphs about all the bad things they hope will happen to the person who stole their piece of pottery. So other people would, like somebody would murder their child, and that was their only recourse in putting this on a piece of lead, rolling it up, throwing it in a sacred brook, and hoping the gods listen. So lawsuits became a very popular thing for those with money. Romans had slaves. Some places, like 50% of the population of different cities would be enslaved people. There's a Roman word, dignitas, if I pronounced it right, or dignity. Slaves did not have dignity. Common-born women did not have dignity. The quality of dignity is only something that well-off men could have. And if you don't have dignity, the laws do not protect you. People can do whatever they want to you. You have no rights. If you're an enslaved person, you're like a piece of furniture. No one cares what you do to your own furniture. And people did really bad things to their slaves and got away with it. If you murdered an enslaved person, that wasn't a crime. If it was your slave, it's like you broke your own chair. If it's somebody else's slave, they could sue you, and they would get, if they win, a slave of equal value to replace your slave. Sometimes a slave would offend you, or you decide you have too many slaves, and you could sell your slave to be entertainment at the Coliseum or the local arena. And the entertainment could be usually just an execution or being set upon by beasts. Crowds in the arena would cheer wildly when people were executed. They were all adjudged to be criminals. They did not announce what the criminal offense was that the person being killed was guilty for, because the crowd didn't care. They just saw that somebody's up there and being executed in a, hopefully for them, painful and novel way. You have some of the great writers in Latin literature would mention going to the arena and seeing an execution, and they would only mention ones that were done in an unusual and entertaining fashion. And Romans were really experts at figuring out ways of doing this. Back to enslaved people, in the year 61, if you get Roman coins, they don't say 61 on it. They didn't have that dating system. A guy named Lucius Perdinius Secundus, which means, for those that don't speak the language, the second Lucius Perdonius, he was killed in his home. Roman law said that if a man is killed in his home, no man, if a man is killed in his household, all of his enslaved people would be punished because the slaves are there to serve their master. If something happens to their master, it's their fault. So if someone comes in the house and kills the master, the slaves are punished. And this guy got killed, and the Romans took all of the enslaved people, every man, woman, and child, yes, child, all 399 of his slaves were crucified. Crucifixion was a very common penalty. It wasn't just for people in the Bible. So things got better eventually. The Roman Emperor Constantine, the first Christian emperor, this is about 1,000 years into their history, reformed Roman law to restrict how enslaved people could be killed. He forbade killing an enslaved person using a club, burning, or throwing from a tall building. This was the 360 AD version of woke. There's people who complained about that. He's, being too lenient. Another good way of supporting yourself was having lawsuits against people for insulting the emperor. In the time of Nero, there was another family. There was a father and a son. Their family's surname was Nero, but they weren't the Nero who was running the empire. And they were sued for refusing to change their family name. And they won the lawsuit. And the person that brought the lawsuit got all of their property. So, not a fair system. We still have some of these ancient legal principles, unfortunately. Property over people, things like that. Not everybody being equal before the law. Those things tend to stick along. Now, religion has often been used alongside law to govern human behavior. Sometimes religious precepts are more merciful than the law is. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of religious doctrine codified into law that applies to punish that doesn't follow that particular religion precept. For example, Florida and Texas. Philosophy has provided us also with moral models not based entirely on law or religion. And if you're unfamiliar with Immanuel Kant, I would suggest reading that. That's my main guide. So how do you resolve conflicts between what the law tells you, what your religion teaches, or your own sense of morality? I would answer that, but I've gone on long enough, so we'll do that some other time. So there is an answer. And now Keith will take any questions you have and any comments or complaints. But first, I want to thank Keith and our two beautiful people here who have handled this crisis of electricity, and you've managed to make this service work. And Keith has been like the guy that has to go downstairs and explain why the engines are. So, Keith.
Well, I think that's a pretty good system. Patrick does the talk and I give the answers. Jim.
Often there are references to the Napoleonic Code, and I wondered how that fits in. Apparently, Napoleon instituted a whole new set of ways of looking at the law, which apparently influenced our legal system. So, can you comment on the Napoleonic Code?
I don't know anything about the Napoleonic Code, but I think Patrick is willing to speak on that.
If memory serves, was basically a codification where he took the existing laws from before the Republic, put some nice words in about justice and the right to a trial and things like that, and codified it and tried to spread that all throughout Europe. And it's not like a revolutionary thing. It was actually a counter-revolutionary because he stepped back from the revolution precepts. And but the wording is used in the basis of the law in Louisiana, which was originally French, and in Quebec. The French have basically gone back closer to the pre-Napoleonic code in terms of the rights of the accused and things like that. So that's all I know about it.
Thank you.
Deborah.
I'm going to try to tell this story so that it makes sense. I'm staying at an Airbnb in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The property manager lives in the same building that I am staying in. The property manager has a puppy. And so the property manager decides to barricade the puppy in at her entrance. She used shutters, cardboard, chairs, plastic. The puppy was barricaded in. The Airbnb that I stayed at did not have a coffee maker. So I went out and bought a $20 Mr. Coffee Maker. When I was getting ready to come home, I went over to the barricade to see if the property manager was at home, because I was going to give her my coffee maker. So what happened is that the puppy was out. I reached down to say, "Hello, puppy. Hello, puppy." I was being taped. And that property manager accused me falsely of poisoning her puppy. And she wanted $4,300 reimbursement for her puppy that I lured with poisoned food. So this is all written up and posted on Airbnb. Do you think I wanted to kill her when I was falsely accused? I did. But this world that I'm learning to live in now, that people are videotaping us, taking pictures of us, and one movement on my part was used against me so that someone else could profit. Is there anything written in history about that one?
Marcia.
I was just wondering, it seems to me, it's my impression, but I haven't done study of this like you have, that we seem to inch and inch and inch towards things and then away and then towards things and away. And I'm just wondering, was there any period in history where there was any great leap forward ethically, morally, or was it a subset of that? Has there been helpful movement forward through religions. I mean, then you think of the Great Crusade, so it's us versus them, kill them. But I don't know. Do you have any sense of that?
Well, there's a couple of periods where ideas were put forward, not totally implemented, but inspired people. The American Revolution, all men are created equal. They really didn't mean it, but it definitely set things on a different course. The Athenians, when they decided they don't want kings anymore and they're going to have a democracy, democracy meant 10% of the adult males in the city get to vote, which is 5,000 people. That was a step forward, and not being defeated by the Persians kept that alive in some form or another. The Vikings, when they settled Iceland, even though they brought their Irish slaves with them, they did decide on a government system with a parliament, and that's been 1,000 years, and they still have the same all thing, which makes their laws. There are steps, and they're always immediately or followed by counter-revolutions, swellings of people who want to restore a golden age before we freed the slaves and things like that. We got periods, but there's always a reaction, and it always takes a long time to get back to the original idea. Like Abe Lincoln, as I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This is my view of democracy, and anything that differs from that is not democracy. Haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but it inspires people and moves people. So there's fits and starts.
Pause.
Yeah, laws are sort of like something we look up to, but they're not always followed. The antebellum South, the laws regarding slaves, if a black man raped a white woman, death after torture. If a white man raped a black woman, maybe a little fine. Things have gotten better since then, but some more recent cases show extreme prejudice and bias. The Harvey Milk case. Here's a man and another man murdered, assassinated, and this guy gets off free because he cried in court. So there's a lot of twisting around of laws and uneven judgments.
Yeah, he actually got 4 years in prison for killing the mayor and the councilman. About 2 years after he was released, he committed suicide. Okay. Everyone's questions have been answered. And former President Keith?